Hey guys, welcome to episode 5 of the Destroy Android shooter game. For this episode, we're going to start dealing with collision detecting. And so what we want is when the bullet hits the Android guy, I want this little explosion icon to appear on top of the bullet and Android guy, and then delete itself after it's done, because now the Android guy is gone. So this is going to involve a new image sprite for the explosion PNG, and then it's going to use a new method called collided with in our Android sprite. So starting with the Android sprite subclass, we are going to implement, if we go to source implement methods, we are going to go down to our collided with method. And so we want, there's collided and colliding. We want collided. So if you notice that when I import it, it's going to give me this sprite object. So if I'm in the Android sprite, then I want to check to see, okay, is this other sprite the bullet sprite? If it is, then we know the bullet is hitting the Android and we should display our explosion. Okay, so first things first, we're going to create another image sprite for our explosion. And the way I'm doing this is every Android sprite gets one explosion object. And this is because each Android needs to be able to explode independently of each other. So with a new image sprite that I'm going to call explosion, I'm going to go ahead and in my constructor, this is where I'm going to set up the explosion attributes. So I'm going to say it's a new image sprite, and again, passing in game canvas as our component container. The picture I'm going to use is the explosion.png file. I'm going to make sure I initialize it. And then I do not want it displayed yet, so I'm going to set visible to false. And this is because I don't want it displayed until the collided with method happens. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to check to see if the other sprite, which is the sprite the Android guy is colliding with, is the bullet sprite. To do that, all you have to do is you use the keyword instance of. And I want to check if it's an instance of my bullet sprite. Now, if it is, we have to do a few things. One thing we want to do is we want to move our explosion, using the move to exactly where the Android guy is. So I'm going to use this method for X and Y. Alright, now the explosion is directly over our Android guy. Because we set the explosion to be not visible in the constructor, we now want to make it visible. Okay. And the other things we're going to want to do is we want to set our Android guy's visibility to be false. And we want our bullet to be false. So some of you might be wondering, like, well, why don't we just delete the component now that we're done with it? Well, the problem is when collision is happening, you can't modify the objects that are currently being iterated over. So basically in the background what's happening is the Java Bridge is doing these checks for you to check, okay, well, are these two sprites colliding? If they are, the way they do that is if they iterate through a loop of all of your sprites that are on the screen. If you're trying to modify or delete a sprite while that list is being iterated over, what ends up happening is you get something called concurrent modification exception. And that's modifying this list while it's being iterated over. So instead, we're going to do it a different way. We're just going to set them to be invisible. They're still there. They're still moving. The user just can't see them. And then when it gets to the end of the screen, each of these components will call edged reached. And here is where we can delete the component. So this is like kind of where the tricky part comes in. What we need to do is we need to check, like, okay, well, if the explosion is not null, then we also want to delete the component in here. So by that I mean we want to check, well, if the explosion is not null, then we need to delete the component from the game canvas. All right, so this is going to remove the explosion object the moment the Android guy hits the bottom of the screen. If you don't do this, what ends up happening is the explosion will stay on screen forever. At some point, you have to delete it from the screen. Okay? And that should do it. If we go ahead and run our program now, we should be able to hit an Android guy, show the explosion image, and it'll disappear after a second or two. Okay, so here are my falling Android guys. Let's see what happens when I fire some apples. Now, because I can't move it, I have to wait for Guy to come directly above me. But there we go. So there's the wham. And you can see now they're disappearing because the Android guy has reached the bottom of the screen. So now we have collision detecting. And the last thing we want to do is, well, if we hit an Android guy, we want to increase our score. So to do that, we are going to take a score int value. Okay, instead of setting the score label text like this all the time, instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new method that can set all this stuff. So down here, I'm just going to create a new method called increment score. And then I'm going to have a new one called set score. So set score is going to take in an input of an integer with the new score value, and it's just going to be score equals score, and then I'm going to set the score label. So I'm going to say score label dot text is score plus the new score value. Okay, and my increment score, all that's going to do is it's going to say score plus plus. We don't really need the this. And then it'll say the same thing. So, okay. So here I'm going to call set score to be 0. And now, lastly, what I want to do is whenever this collided with happens on the Android sprite, I want to increment my score count. So score plus plus. And actually, we have our increment method, so I can just call increment score. So now, if I run this again, I should see that my label increments whenever I hit an Android guy. Okay, so let's see if I can get some Android guys to appear. There we go, we hit one, and you can see my score value incremented by 1. And there's 2. Okay. So that's it for this episode. The next one that we are going to do is we are going to deal with when our Android guy hits our ship. And what that's going to cause is you could have it be a game over, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually decrement your score value whenever you get hit. All right, I'll see you next time.